Good afternoon. Great to have you with us for another 45 minutes of lunchtime learning. Yeah, what have we got for you today? Well, today is all about research and how we ourselves can play a role in that research. My guest is Daniel Bailey. He's a PhD osteopath. He's a research fellow at NCOR, the National Council for Osteopathic Research. So obviously the slant is going to be very firmly towards osteopathy. But really, it doesn't matter whether you yourself are an osteopath, a chiropractor or a physio or any other healthcare professional, the topic will be useful because the principles can be applied anywhere. At least that's what I assume. So let's find out. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I know we've had quite a lengthy chat before the show started, but obviously I suppose you better tell us what PBRNs are all about first of all.
So PBRN, or Practice-Based Research Network, is essentially a collection of clinicians or clinics who work together with an overseeing organisation, which in this case will be NCOR, but might often be a university or other academic institution. And the purpose is to conduct research that is highly relevant to clinical practice, so particularly the clinical practice of those clinicians that are part of the PBRN.
So would those clinics have a common interest, or would it just be a bunch of clinics who say, hey, let's get together and produce some data?
A common interest in as much as they want to try and learn more about their own clinical practice and gather more data which is going to be of benefit to patients. But the exact topic of that research will vary. So PBRNs will continually be conducting different studies. So some studies may be of interest to some members, but not to all. And so you can choose to take part in which ones you want. And the idea of particularly our PBRN is that the members themselves will have a say in what research we actually conduct. So they'll be able to say the things that they want to know more about their practice and perhaps need some more information from. Okay. And then we can try and design a study to get that information and provide those answers for the members.
So right, those clinics which are participating, they don't decide the subject of the research. That's done by, in this case, NCOR, is it?
There are two approaches. There's what's called the top-down, which is where the university or NCOR might say, we want to do this research. Please could we use you or your clinics to gather that data? But then there's also the bottom-up approach where we say to clinicians, look, what's important to you at the moment? What answers do you need to your clinical practice? How can we provide more information to help you with your patients? And then they give us those questions and we'll try and turn it into a research study that we can conduct within the PBRN to get those answers.
Have you got any of these going on at the moment?
So not with our PBRN, we're just starting that at the moment. So there are other PBRNs that exist and studies are ongoing, but for the NCOR Research Network, which we're just starting, we just launched it at the IO convention. We're trying to get as much expression of interest from osteopaths as possible. And then the next step will be to send everyone who sends an expression of interest a survey. And the purpose of that survey is to gather as much information about our potential members as possible so that we have an understanding of what the capacity of our PBRN is going to be. So do we have enough osteopaths with paediatric interest to conduct some research into paediatrics, for example?
Which is desperately needed, isn't it? Because we're not allowed to advertise that we treat children at the moment.
Exactly, yeah. So we're hoping that the PBRN can start to address some of these issues. And so this survey is really going to help define what osteopathy is, because it's going to be describing what osteopaths do. And so we can sort of say what patient groups are we seeing, how often are we seeing them, how are we helping them? And then we'll know what research is really feasible. But also we're aiming to publish that research outside of osteopathy so that we can really start to communicate with other healthcare professionals and say, look, this is what osteopathy is doing. This is what osteopathy looks like in the UK at the moment.
So I'm guessing this isn't the brainchild of NCOR. I'm guessing these things have happened elsewhere. Have they got a proven track record of success?
Yeah, absolutely. So they originally started in general practice, and it was really a group of general practitioners who were seeing lots and lots of children with measles. This is sort of in the mid-1900s, and in that country, it was in Europe, the paediatricians were saying, look, you shouldn't be seeing these children with measles. This is very much a specialist thing. It should only be coming to the paediatricians. And so these GPs got together, they did some data collection to show really how much of their patient base was these children with measles, to say, look, we have a really important role in looking after this part of the community. And so that was really the first kind of evidence generated in PBRNs to say, look, this is the part of practice that's important to these patients. But yes, they've existed in lots of other countries. For osteopathy, this will be the first one for osteopathy in the UK. There's one that's just been started recently for chiropractors in the
You can't say that. The chiropractors have beaten us to it.
They have, unfortunately. I believe
well done, the chiropractors.
I believe there's still yet to actually be any research started, but they have sort of begun with the infrastructure of a PBRN like ourselves.
Do you know what the topic is for that?
Traditionally, the first study really is a data collection of the members to really get an idea of what your feasibility is. Yep. Because, as I say, there's no point saying we want to do a study in paediatrics and you find out you've only got one clinic who actually sees any children in your PBRN. So you really need to understand what your members are doing before you can start to design any studies. But Australia probably has the most successful one. They managed to get half of the profession to register for their PBRN in Australia. So this is an organisation called Orion. And there's a very successful chiropractic PBRN in America that's published some excellent research. These exist for all forms of healthcare, dentistry, general practice, physiotherapy, medicine. Because the benefit is they're collecting the data from the patients of the actual clinics. So it's going to be from the patients seeing osteopaths, rather than us setting up a very artificial research study in a university hospital, for example, where the patients that are going there aren't really like the patients we see in community-based practice in osteopathy. Yeah. So translating that research from a hospital-based university study to osteopathic practice can be quite difficult.
It sounds as though it's, we talk about RCTs being the gold standard of, double-blinded, placebo-controlled RCTs, whatever, being the gold standard in research. But of course, I've long sort of thought, and I don't think I'm alone in this, that saying if you take a piece of research and say, well, what happens if you manipulate this joint? That doesn't reflect what goes on in practice. Whereas this sounds like more of a pragmatic research where you say people come in and then they go out, did they get better? Exactly. Rather than what did you actually do in the treatment? Exactly.
RCTs have their place, but in reality, start to finish, you're talking 10 years and at least £1 million. And RCTs have their problems. They don't necessarily always reflect what's happening in clinical practice. Osteopathy is a very nuanced discipline. It has lots of subtleties. Osteopaths practice very differently. Even within one clinic, different osteopaths might practice differently. So trying to break down osteopathy into its component parts and then investigate those separately isn't ever really going to provide useful data to how an osteopath works in clinical practice.
Doesn't that make it equally difficult to do the research though? Because if you take a dozen clinics and you say, well, these clinics all treat children, you don't know that any of them treat in the same way. Some might be entirely craniosacral, some might do something else, visceral or soft tissue or even manipulation in some cases. Doesn't that mean that your research is not really going to be representative of what an osteopath, whatever that is, can do for children?
It depends what the purpose of the research is for. If we're looking at research to really try and help osteopaths understand how their treatment is affecting children, then yes, we need to be quite specific about what techniques they're doing to try and really evaluate the action of those. If we're trying to produce research to take to funding bodies and government to say, look, this is where you need to be spending your money on healthcare, they're just interested in the outcomes and whether people get better. They're less interested in how the patients got better. So we might just want to be looking at outcome measures of improvement over time. The exact nuances of what treatment was done is not going to be important in that kind of research. So it really depends on the focus.
Simon's just sent in a related question, and his words are, I know this is a big ask, but I'd love to have some research done for baby treatment. I know it's a difficult area of research, but is there anything that can be done? But it doesn't sound like it's any more difficult than any other aspect of a PBRN to me, whether it's babies or otherwise.
I mean, the most challenging thing with research is always getting participants. That's one of the biggest challenges. But with a PBRN, the aim is that you've always got a source of data, a source of patient data and a source of clinician data. So if we have enough osteopaths that register who are seeing paediatric patients, then we have a resource where we can start to collect data. And it could be as simple as giving them a validated PROM, patient-reported outcome measure. You give it them at the start of the treatment, during and at the end of the treatment. And then afterwards, we can analyze that data and we can produce some nice, valid data that says, look, these patients did or did not get better during this course of treatment.
How, I'm going to use the term powerful, is this research going to be? I mean, in terms of your outcomes, do you think it's going to be enough to convince the general medical world? Let's take babies, which is an area of big contention. We're not allowed to say we can treat colic. So maybe there's a question we can think of for colic. And I know we first have to define what colic is and which type of colic it is and all the rest of that sort of stuff. How many people would you need to contribute, do you think, to that sort of research to show something meaningful at the end of it, either positive or negative?
So, I mean, for a PBRN to operate, we'd need...
I'm just going to stop because somebody said, what's a PBRN? And we did say this at the beginning, we didn't catch that.
So it stands for Practice-Based Research Network.
Yeah.
So it's research that's taking place in the kind of practices that it aims to actually inform and provide.
Sure. So sorry, that'll satisfy Paul who asked that question.
So the colic research question. So yeah, what we do is we'd have to design a study. I mean, if you're talking about power in terms of statistical terms, then that's really going to come down to actual numbers of patients, and that's something that you have to calculate prior to a study. But you know, a PBRN would need to have 15 clinics or clinicians across 4 locations in order to qualify as a PBRN.
Right.
And that really is all it would take, because if those...
Why is that number so important?
That's just the number that's been determined to be represented enough to create research that's going to be of some use, and that's the minimum threshold to be able to register your organisation as a PBRN. Right.
But you could get 15 clinics within a quarter of a mile of each other in London. Would that count?
In theory.
Opposed to...
Yes. Yeah. The difficulty then is we can't then start to generalise the results to populations outside of London. So ideally we want clinics to take part in the whole country. Yeah. And yeah, we just need to choose how we want to measure progress in patients. There's likely to be various different validated measures to be able to track progress, from the perception of how mum thinks they're doing to how the baby, you know, symptoms, monitoring changes in symptoms, and then we can produce evidence and publish that to show efficacy for osteopathic treatment if that's the case. But because it's being conducted in the osteopathic practices the way the osteopaths do it, there's probably more chance of it showing success rather than trying to create an artificially based study in a setting that's not how care is actually being delivered. When
you say showing success, you mean success of the research, not necessarily the success of the treatment, because we can't presuppose that.
No, so you know, we can't conduct research to prove an assumption. We have to just conduct the research and see what results we get. But you know, there's more chance that it's going to show the results that osteopaths will expect if it's measuring the treatment as it's delivered in practice. As soon as you start to try and change that delivery and you just say, look, just do this one technique and we'll see if that one technique works, then you're not actually assessing osteopathic care anymore, because you know there are so many different factors, and you know all these contextual factors of how the care is delivered. And
you're playing up to that misconception that all we do is manipulate a joint, click a joint to make people better.
Yeah, you know, the caregiving begins as soon as the patient arrives, and all these things, particularly in something like colic, where it's very much about the relationship between the parents and the child, not just the actual issues the child has. You know, the contextual factors of clinical practice are going to be hugely important there. So if you try and reduce that to just a technique, it's more likely to not have any impact as we are used to seeing the impact in clinical practice.
Yeah. How onerous is this going to be for the practitioners taking part and for their patients as well? And I ask because I remember when long ago we had our NHS contract, they wanted feedback on how things had gone, and I looked at the Bournemouth questionnaire, and I took a look at this and I thought, I can't give that to patients because it's a horribly complicated and daunting thing to fill in. It takes forever. The questions are probably designed by experts, but not with the user in mind. So what we don't want is practitioners put off by the thought that I'm going to spend half my day doing paperwork to support this research.
Absolutely. And we're acutely aware that taking part in research is burdensome. And if it's not your job, then it is very much something you're giving your time to do. So this is something we're really thinking a lot about as to how we can reduce that burden, both on osteopaths or clinicians and to patients. One of the things we're developing at the moment is a browser plugin, so a Chrome plugin. So this is a piece of software that sits in your Chrome browser. So when you open your Clinico software, for example, that's the software we're working with at the moment, it will attach itself to Clinico, and with obviously your patient's consent and your approval, what it will be able to do is start to pull information from your patient's clinical notes. So it will then also ask you to ask a series of additional questions. So for example, a pain score, how long the patient's had the problem, what the location of the problem is. And what it can then do is it can match that data to existing data that Clinico is already collecting, such as date of birth, how many appointments they've had, the patient's sex, for example. And within just a few clicks and maybe 30 seconds of additional questioning, over a period of several treatments, we can actually start to collect quite a rich amount of data, which has been completely unburdensome to the patient and probably taken you as a clinician an extra 30 seconds. And then the software will be able to send automated text messages to the patient to ask what their current pain score is every week, for example, so that data can continue to be collected without the osteopath's intervention.
Are you looking at other clinic software than Clinico?
Yeah, so we've started with Clinico because our research showed that this was one of the most popular ones. But as most of the clinic softwares now sit in the cloud and are used through a browser with relatively simple modification, this existing plugin software should be able to be used with lots of the software products now.
Have you approached Jane? Because I have a particular interest in Jane being in this this setup.
We're still in. We've got the plugin up and running, and we're now going to enter a testing phase with Clinico. And then once we've got it up and running with Clinico, we'll be looking to roll it out to other clinic software packages. But that's just one thing that we're looking at. That, some studies it might simply just be having to hand a patient a piece of information about the research study that they take away, and then the patient can totally engage with that on their own time, and the osteopath will have nothing more to do with it. So there'll be a variety. For those who want to get more involved, it might be that we get a small collection of osteopaths and we conduct a systematic review. So we actually start to look at data that's already been collected, but try and merge it into a more useful piece of research that helps inform practice. And that might be a more time-consuming piece of work for osteopaths who are interested in learning a bit more about research. But for others, it might be as simple as handing out a piece of information to the patient to take away for them to consider if they want to take part.
Yeah. Are you finding it difficult to attract practitioners into the research world?
I think research is always a challenge. We did some background research where we did 3 focus groups with osteopaths around the country, and we explored the barriers and facilitators to a PBRN. And I think what came across was a lot of people had negative experiences of research at undergraduate level. I think when you train to be an osteopath, you want to be an osteopath because you want to do clinical practice. And what you don't want to do is spend your time doing research. And so I think research lectures were always a challenge for undergraduate students because it wasn't why they were there. And they often weren't delivered by osteopaths, so they weren't really made relevant to osteopathy. And so I think a lot of people get turned off research at a very early stage.
It's also such a hugely complex topic, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I remember when I embarked on an MSc, which I sadly didn't complete because of various reasons. But I remember one of the big topics there was about assessing research and understanding the hierarchy of the different studies and how the data could be manipulated or influenced and all that sort of stuff. The statistics alone is a specialist subject. All of that is enough to put people off, isn't it?
Absolutely, and even now, my statistic ability is very poor, and for big studies, we will have to get in expertise to run the statistics. So we're certainly not expecting any osteopaths to have to be doing anything along those lines. We really want the osteopaths to be a gateway to accessing their own data, because we're interested to extract data about clinicians, but also access to their patients, because osteopathy in the UK has such a rich source of data from all its patients and its clinicians, which we're not really doing a lot with at the moment, and it can benefit the profession enormously. Yeah.
Joe has asked if we were to register a clinic for PBRN, and she says they're only a small 6 or 7 osteopath clinic. Would you provide everything they needed, e.g. the proms to give the information out that's needed?
Absolutely. So you would register as an individual rather than a clinic. So you register, you go to the NCOR website and you just leave your name and email address, and then you're essentially entered into our database, and then you'll receive the initial survey. So that very much needs to be done as an individual. So if everyone at that clinic wants to register, fantastic. But we'd only send one survey to one email address if they were to register. But yeah, that's simply an expression of interest, and then what that means is after you get the survey, if you complete the survey, you're essentially enrolled onto the PBRN, and then that means you're going to be involved in the communication about how research is going to take place, and you'll be invited to take part in studies. If you choose to take part in a study, then any training that's needed will be provided, and obviously any resources that are needed are going to be provided. Absolutely.
So in terms of Joe's clinic, where there are 6 or 7 people, if Joe is the only one who fills in the form, that doesn't mean that the others won't be part of the research when it goes live, as it were. If they've got a cloud system, for example.
Yeah, I mean, ideally we'd like all 6 of those osteopaths to register so we can gather data on them as well, because they're all going to practice slightly differently, have different areas of interest, and so that will just help inform our capacity as a PBRN if we know exactly what those 6 osteopaths are doing. But yeah, if was it Joe registers, then yeah, she'll receive the information, and hopefully all the osteopaths would want to get involved, because that means, you know, we'd be gathering a lot more patient data, which would be great. But yeah, I'd encourage osteopaths to register individually if possible.
Okay. Perhaps one obstacle is the thought in the back of each practitioner's mind, oh my God, someone's going to see what I'm doing and I will be criticised for not being good enough, because we all suffer from that, don't we? That imposter syndrome. Is that a risk they run?
No, but this is something that came up when we did our background research. Yeah, and there is a slight feeling of vulnerability that you're opening yourself up to this assessment, and you know, not all the research is going to be about evaluating the effectiveness of treatment. You know, we might do some research on whether osteopaths are at risk of burnout, for example, and we might do some surveying of osteopathic practice. Other suggestions have been looking at why do patients discontinue treatment. So we'd actually be more looking at the patients and, you know, why have you stopped? Or how do osteopaths determine the intervals between treatment appointments? It's not all going to be about effectiveness, and, you know, who's to say what's right or wrong anyway? So we're really looking at the osteopathic practice to see what's actually happening, and then we can look at what works and what doesn't. And if something isn't working that you're doing, then, you know, I would think it's much better to be then made aware of it, and you can do something about it. But there's certainly going to be no criticism or blaming and shaming. That's certainly not the purpose.
And obviously everything is confidential at this stage. Let's say that we did a broadcast only a week ago on a complaint against an osteopath. In the event that there's a complaint raised against somebody who's part of the study, could any of the data that you have garnered be required for investigation, or would it be of any use to them?
No, everything would be given anonymously. So patients would all be given in their data anonymously. If osteopaths are being surveyed, then that's all going to be provided anonymously. Now,
I want to turn to the dinosaurs. Ashley, who obviously lives in a cage, beating off the dinosaurs from day to day, says, sorry, Ashley. He says he doesn't use clinic software. He just does everything on paper, and you know, lots of people do. Is that a bar to entry?
No, absolutely not. So, you know, we have, other than the initial survey, there are currently no studies planned. And it may be that a study would run for 3 to 6 months. It might be we have a couple of studies running at any one time. So the potential is there are going to be, you know, 1, 2, 3 or 4 studies a year that are running, and you will have the option to take part or not in any or all of those studies. So if it's a paediatric study, then obviously we're only going to be looking at osteopaths who have paediatric patients. If we do decide to use the plug-in software, then yes, that might only be available to clinico users. But, you know, this isn't just going to be one study. This is hopefully going to be multiple studies over a period of years. So some studies you may be eligible for, others you may not, but they're all going to be voluntary as to whether you take part anyway. But
and I guess for those practitioners who are still on paper notes, it simply means that they will have to write something in addition, as opposed to letting the software send the data to you.
Yeah, so, you know, if we were purely doing a plug-in based study, it may be that we'd only be able to use clinico software users at this point, and it might be that you know, that's one of the questions in this survey: what software do you use? And if we only get 3 people come back who use clinico, we know that study's not viable, and so we'll have to design different studies. That's why this initial survey is so important, because it really gives us the feasibility of what we can conduct. But no, there are many studies in which it wouldn't matter whether you had computerized software or not. It might be handing out a questionnaire to a patient. It might be the osteopath completing a questionnaire, because we're actually interested in data from the osteopath. So there'll be many studies that they'll be able to be involved with, and computerization of notes won't be a barrier.
No. I was just wondering, as you were talking about all that, whether actually there might conceivably be a difference between osteopaths who use software and osteopaths who do everything paper-based. I don't know, in any part of their practice, their outlook or the way they do business. You know, maybe it takes longer during an appointment to fill in the paper. Maybe you have more eye contact with a patient if you're writing rather than computing.
Absolutely,
And I don't know if that would influence the results. But the other question is, isn't there a lot of opportunity for the people providing the data to skew the results they get? Because we all want our clinics to look successful.
That's always a risk, and that's something that we as the organising body, as the sort of academic involvement, would have to look at in the design of study. So we're always looking at risk of bias. You know, how can these results be affected? How can this data collection be affected? So yes, ultimately it might be that, for example, in the plugin, there is an option where you have to choose what your patient's current pain score is. And so maybe you could exaggerate the pain score or minimize the pain score to show an improvement. But, you know, we would design the study in such a way that there was no real benefit to the osteopath in doing that, because it would be data collected completely anonymously. No one would know it was their patient, which patient it was, or that it was them. So there'd be no real benefit in them doing that. So we try to eradicate those sorts of risks through the design of the studies.
Yeah. Salome Olivia says, how long will the project run? I'm guessing she means each individual study, because assuming that you can get enough participants, then PBRNs will go on indefinitely.
Yeah, so the hope is that the PBRN will just be a permanent fixture from now on in. And, you know, it may be that the membership profile changes. People may choose they leave, more people will join. And what's called sub-studies will continue to roll out.
Are you selling it to students as well at the moment? Are you getting into the colleges?
We're exploring that, because obviously at some point these students are going to become osteopaths, and so we want them to be members of the PBRN. And it may be that we conduct some separate studies within the osteopathic education institutions, but they will be distinct studies. But no, we'd encourage student osteopaths to register as soon as they graduate, but at the moment we don't have a separate facility for students to register, but we are in discussion with the OEIs to do some separate research. But the
OEIs?
The osteopathic education institutions.
The colleges.
Sure. So to go back to the question, the length of there'll be lots of separate studies, and how long they take will vary. So if we do a systematic review with a group of osteopaths, that will probably take about 6 months. If we were doing more of a kind of longitudinal study, looking at patient progress over a period of 3 to 6 months, then once you start analysing the data afterwards, you're perhaps looking at more of a 12-month study. But the osteopathic involvement of that might have just been for the first 3 months, handing out information to patients to say, please take part in the study. We'd then sort of do the heavy lifting of statistical analysis and writing up research papers and disseminating it. So it will vary.
Isn't one of the challenges of this, however, that a lot of research studies compare this treatment with normal treatment. All you're going to get from this is what happens when people come to osteopaths. You won't know whether it's better or worse than what happens when they go to see a chiropractor or their GP or a physiotherapist or a sports massage therapist. How do you get that sort of data so that patients get the best treatment?
Yeah, so that would be more along the randomized controlled trial design that you're discussing, where you're comparing different arms of a trial. So you'd have a no treatment or a standard treatment versus an intervention. So that's very much an RCT. And these would be more observational studies, longitudinal studies, where we're really just following patients over a period of time. Or they might be surveys, where we're either surveying patients or surveying osteopaths. And because a lot of tools are available now, and these tools are often the patient-reported outcome measures or PROMs, they're essentially questionnaires, really, but they've been validated, which means that the questions are actually measuring something tangible and reliable that can be repeated. So often we'll use the same tools that have been used in other studies. So we actually get comparable data, and we can say, well, look, the scores in this study were favourable to the same tool used in a different study for a different intervention. So there is the ability to compare across interventions by using these validated tools. You mentioned
the term observational study there, and of course whenever I read any research, the first criticism that will come up is this is an observational study, therefore it is at the lowest end of research material. Is that your perception of observational studies, or do these new tools make it a little bit more substantial?
Yeah, there is a hierarchy. With systematic reviews sitting at the top. And so, you know, systematic reviews are something we'd be looking at doing, and that's where you sort of bring together lots of separate research studies, whether that's lots of separate RCTs.
We've got a picture of systematic reviews, I think, haven't we?
Lots of separate.
There it is.
Yeah, so as you can see, systematic reviews sit at the top of the hierarchy studies, and these kind of observational studies or cohort studies, the number 5, sit a little bit lower.
Yeah, so people won't be able to read this. So systematic reviews here, critically appraised topics, critically appraised individual articles, RCTs. I didn't realise RCTs would be so low down, to be honest. Then cohort studies, which includes observational studies, case control studies or reports, and then background info and expert opinion. Yes.
Yeah. So that's not to say that they don't have value just because they sit lower down in the pyramid, and that's not to say that they're not going to bring useful clinical information. And the issue with randomized controlled trials is they're conducted in a setting that is not the same as where the care is actually delivered. So immediately they lose that generalizability to osteopathic practice. Whereas if you've conducted the research in an osteopathic clinic, it's highly translatable to osteopathic practice, and you can immediately read the paper and go, yes, that's how I practice. That's going to make a difference to what I do as a clinician.
Yeah. And when you say systematic reviews, are we talking Cochrane style reviews?
So Cochrane's are very high quality systematic reviews that focus on clinical topics. So yeah, they can be sort of seen as the gold standard of systematic reviews, if you like. But no, not all systematic reviews are Cochrane reviews. So essentially you would ask a clinical question, and then you would search the available research, and then you would try and bring all that available research together to answer that clinical question. So ultimately, the PBRN has two options. We can either go out and gather new data from our members, or we can use our members to help examine existing data in the form of a systematic review to try and answer a question that's meaningful to them as clinicians.
Yeah. More questions from the audience, if I may. Nikki says you can shorten the Bournemouth questionnaire to focus on key topics, which makes it easy for parents and clinicians. Nikki had to do that for another research project. And that's fair enough, Nikki. That's exactly what I did for our NHS proms. I just looked at the Bournemouth questionnaire and turned it into what I thought was a much more sensible reporting mechanism. Kim says, I think a research on hip problems, for example, when the hip presents with pain to an osteopath and which presents with a problem on X-ray, and if the treatment of an osteopath treating the pelvis improves the outcome. So an idea from Kim, looking at different aspects of examining a hip and treating a hip. I guess it's early days for her to start proposing topics for the reviews. We need to get all the names on the list first, don't we?
That's it. But no, we want people to think of things. We want people to suggest ideas, because the purpose of the PBRN is to benefit osteopaths, and so it's no good us producing research that osteopaths have no interest in. So we do want to make this for its members, but yeah, we will have ideas as well to offer, and it's because of the rich data that osteopathic practice has in the UK, it's also very desirable to external research bodies as well. So as I said earlier, the hardest thing in research is getting participants. So there will be lots of research organisations, whether that's in public health, musculoskeletal services, who potentially would like to use the osteopathic PBRN to gather information for their own research studies. And the benefit of this is that they're going to be disseminating that research to a much wider audience than just osteopathy. And so this helps to communicate what osteopathic practice is doing in the UK to a much wider audience, which helps to promote the profession. And that's worked really successfully in Australia with the PBRN they've got over there. As much research done there is actually through non-osteopathic research organisations as it is osteopathic ones.
Yeah. Given that you aren't going to get 100% of the profession to enrol in this, do you have a target number to make this a worthwhile project?
So as I said, the baseline is 15 osteopaths across 4 locations, but we'd hope that we get many more than that. We've currently had around 100 expressions of interest. We will send surveys to all of those, and then the number of surveys we get back is really how many members we're going to have. So obviously all those 100 probably won't return the survey, but even if 50% did, we've got enough to start to conduct meaningful research. And
we'll put this up on the screen as well, but in order to register interest, people need to go to ncor.org.uk/PBRN, and that's just an expression of interest at this stage, but the more we have, the merrier this is going to be, and the more powerful the whole research is going to be.
There's no commitment. You leave your name, you leave your email address, you'll get a registration email back, and then you'll probably get a newsletter about where the project's up to within a few weeks. And then as soon as we've finished designing the survey, testing it, got ethical approval, we'll distribute this survey, hopefully early part of next year. And then it will be quite a lengthy survey because there's a lot of information we need. And then if you've completed and returned that survey, you're effectively enrolled on the PBRN. But there's still no commitment. It's still optional to take part in any of the sub-studies.
Well, I do hope if you can keep us informed here at APM about it, and every time we get the opportunity, we can push this stuff out. Because you've talked about people getting newsletters. Well, we all know that an awful lot of that stuff will go straight into spam and will never be seen. So anything we can do to help raise its profile, we'd be very happy to help with that. I've got a question from Christina Ann here, who says, are there safeguards if the internet is lost for a period of time? And I suspect that that's not going to be an issue, but you'll have that. She's talking about you getting data from Clinico and perhaps other software platforms.
Yes. So the data is recorded live and then it's stored in secure servers. So, as much as if you lose internet connection in your clinical practice, you can't access Clinico, then obviously you're not going to be able to upload data. But once that data has been collected, it's safely stored.
Yeah.
So yes, an internet loss would mean you couldn't collect data, but any data you'd already collected would be perfectly safe.
Well, I imagine Clinico is the same, but I know that with Jane, if the internet were to go down, you can carry on writing your patient notes. Obviously, you can't refresh your diary and things like that with new patients, but you can you keep writing your patient notes and collecting the data, and as soon as the internet's restored, then it all gets uploaded to the cloud. So, it wouldn't be lost; it would just be delayed.
That's it. Yeah. So these are the sorts of things we need to test in this next phase with the plugin. But again, that's just going to be one option that we've got for these sub-studies. Yes. That's not to say that all studies are going to involve this. That each study will be different and involve different elements. But this was just one thing that we wanted to design to reduce the burden of data collection on the osteopaths, because we know that's a real off-putting concept.
Do you happen to know where chiropractors would go to register their interest for their own PBRN?
The acronym for it is CRUNCH, and if you Google that, chiropractic PBRN crunch, then you do get taken to the website. I'm not sure, and I think you can register there. I'm not sure. Some PBRNs have a closed registration period where you have to register within a certain time, and then they might open that up again. Others, it's just open registration constantly. So I'm not sure of the exact structure of.
Do you know who's running those?
I don't know. I think it's attached to one of the universities, one of the institutions that teaches, but it's pretty easy to find on Google.
Yeah, we had some chiropractic researchers on the show some time back, and they didn't mention crunch then. But
I think it is quite embryonic at this point.
Hopefully the registration is still open then for that.
Yeah, hopefully.
I will try to find out, and I'll send it out in an email tomorrow, together with a handout of your slides, of which that was only one that we saw a minute ago.
Yes.
Yeah, and links to doing all this. While we're on the topic of chiropractors, what's the state of play in research between osteopathy and chiropractic? Take this wherever you want to go with that question.
In terms of, do you mean collaboratively or?
Well, you and I were talking before we went live that actually there's going to be probably a lot greater collaboration between certainly the UCO and what is currently, it's not even the AECC anymore, it's got another letter in the acronym.
Health Sciences.
Well, they're becoming a new name, but since they became a university, they've become something else. But the Chiropractic College in Bournemouth and UCO from London, there's going to be a greater collaboration with them for whatever reason. Potentially
there's going to be a merger. And hopefully what this will mean is that there is additional resources. And particularly with research, that only means greater strength in conducting research.
Yes.
And as a lot of the aims and objectives of research in chiropractic and osteopathy are going to be closely aligned, it'll hopefully open up more research opportunities with those two successful organisations working
together. Strength in numbers. And as I've said to you, and as I've said to our audience over many, many occasions, while I don't think osteopathy and chiropractic are exactly the same, there are so many similarities. We should be working much more closely together than certainly the tutors at my own college suggested when I was there. When it was quite a bit of hostility towards chiropractors, which I think is unreasonable.
And certainly the patients that they see have a lot of similarities, if
indeed,
not being identical, and it's really the patients that we're interested in. So absolutely.
And there are plenty of patients to go around, so we shouldn't feel too threatened by these things, should we? Claire has asked how the system would work with abbreviations. Would notes need to be written out in full if they're going to be taken up electronically?
So as far as the plugin goes, what the plugin actually sucks out of Clinico is only the standardized information. Yeah. So it's date of birth, it's the dates that the patient attended for the appointment. The plugin then presents you with a series of questions that have drop-down menus because we need to take standardized data. So no, it's not going to be sucking up your clinic notes and information that you've typed in. It's only going to be extracting very standardized data.
And then digital scores for pain or outcome in some other way.
Exactly. And then it offers you some additional questions, which are just really simple drop-down menus. Currently, it's pain score. One thing we're looking at is what healthcare professionals the patient has seen before they see the osteopath, because that's something we're quite interested in. So there's a little drop-down option there. What their current pain scale is, and then that gets asked every time so that we can obviously see how the pain scale improves through the course of the treatment, what location in the body their symptoms are. So this just standardizes the kind of information you're already taking, but it just makes it in a very easy standardized form. And then what we're also adding onto that is a dashboard. So what this will do is it will present all the data that you've taken using the plugin in a really simple dashboard format, which is going to be great for clinical audit. So it'll say, you know, after you've used it for a couple of months, it'll say, there'll be a nice little pie chart that says this is the breakdown of your patients. You know, 30% had knee pain, 40% had back pain, and then this is the trajectory of their pain scores, the average pain scores over 6 months.
And this is fantastic, isn't it? Because it helps with that irritating objective activity that we have to do in clinic. It's an objective activity done for you. So you want to do a clinical audit, bang, there's your statistics. Done for you. And so another great outcome from this. I've got a long question or a long observation, I don't know which yet, from Petersfield. Whoever it is, it's Carolyn. Carolyn says, my practice has been receiving a good referral rate from the midwifery team at her local hospital through the pandemic to now. Patients referred are infants presenting with latching and suckling issues, which may or may not include tongue tie and the need for assessment. Her practice does. She attended the NCOR PBRM demo trial day at Oxford during 2022, and I've had some wonderful support from NCOR since. Thank you to Dr. Jerry and Carol Fawkes. In helping me to develop a study practice-based research. I'm not yet there, but almost a little further help, almost a little further help required, please. So it's a bit of a shout out for NCOR and that type of research and the help that they're going to get from you guys in getting this stuff done.
That's it. So anyone who's interested in doing research, whether that's with the PBRN or not, they can approach NCOR, and you know that's part of our remit, is to give support to osteopaths who want to conduct research. And so we often support individuals such as the one you just talked about, who are conducting their own research. But you know, we'd like those individuals who are interested in research to be part of the PBRN, because you know the questionnaire that we're sending out will ask a lot of questions that would be really useful. So we ask about, do you receive referrals from other healthcare practitioners? So that would be a really interesting clinic, because they're getting a lot of midwifery referrals. So that would then open up a whole set of studies we could conduct about working with midwife teams, for example. So that's why that initial survey is so important, because it tells us what we can realistically achieve. Yeah.
Well, you know, I've never treated babies myself, horrible little squealy wriggly things, but I can't help feeling quite excited about the opportunity that we might finally get some research, which hopefully will show that our treatments work. But one way or another, we might come up with an answer to this age-old question of, you know, whether the intangible stuff that practitioners do with tiny children is actually beneficial to them. You know, and everything I hear from pediatric osteopaths is that yes, the outcome measures are good, but we haven't got anything to satisfy the wider medical community yet, have we?
No, it is a challenge, and a lot of it comes down to the design of the study, the tools that you use, how you're measuring that progress, but also how the care was delivered. You know, was the care actually delivered in a way that it's delivered in clinical practice?
And actually, the requirement from the Advertising Standards Agency is that you can claim something on your website provided you've got evidence to back up what you do. Well, this is the evidence that we need for that and for other things. There are lots of things we're not allowed to say we can treat on under advertising standards rules, but yeah. Very quickly, is there anything else that we haven't covered in this discussion that you think is important to
No, I think
stage?
we've articulated most things, but I think, you know, there's such a diversity of osteopathy in the UK. Really, we want to say that if you want what you do as an osteopath to be represented in how osteopathy is discussed and articulated to the profession, the public, and wider healthcare world, then please get involved with the PBRN.
Well, we'll push it for you, definitely, and we'll make sure that the link is available. Thank you, Daniel. That's been great, very informative indeed. I didn't think I would enjoy a discussion about research, but I really have. It's been great. Hopefully, that's also provided some food for thought for you. If you think it's something that you're prepared to help with, then do follow that link. It's on the screen. That ncor.org.uk/PBRN. I mean, this could be really profession changing for us, and we will find out the link for chiropractors. I'll send that out as well. You know, this is about bringing our practices, our treatments, our disciplines together rather than driving wedges between them. Bear in mind, as Daniel has said, you will only be registering your interest at this stage. You're not committing yourself to anything, but you really could be doing something useful to help the profession.